It's tough to remain grounded in the Lord when you go through various trials and tribulations. But Joseph and the Deek is here to tell you that God rewards obedience. Welcome to another edition of Sunday School with the Deek. I am Deacon Wallace Hill IV, proud member of the Mount Pisgah Missionary Baptist Church, where my father, the Honorable Wallace Hill III, is the pastor. I am so happy to be coming in to your living rooms, your cell phones, your computers, your televisions, and your tablets once again. Thank you all for tuning in each week as we break down the Sunday School lesson based on the International Lesson Series. So for those of you that are new to this channel, do me a favor. Go down to the subscribe button at the bottom of the page, click the little bell, and each week, you'll be notified, ding, 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 the Deek has uploaded another lesson. I'm so excited about this new quarter that we started last week. It's called Love for One Another. And beginning with last week, and for the next 4 weeks, we'll be in the book of Genesis dealing with the struggles of love. Our first lesson was a doozy, if you remember. And this week we continue with the events that happened with Joseph. As you remember last week's lesson, Joseph's brothers plotted to kill him because they were jealous of him. He was their father's favorite son. Their father Jacob made Joseph a coat of many colors, and it was a special coat, and it only ignited more fury into the brothers that already hated Joseph. Then on top of that, Joseph had 2 dreams, remember, that basically amounted to one day that his brothers and his father actually was going to bow down to him. And this infuriated the brothers even more. And so when the first opportunity came for them to get rid of him, guess what they did? They jumped on it. At first they planned to kill him. But their oldest brother, Reuben, changed their mind and convinced them to just throw him into a pit to let him die. But then when they saw some Midianite traders come, they decided to sell Joseph for 20 pieces of silver. Oh, wasn't that so nice? That was where last week's lesson ended off. And if you want the full details, hit the stop button right now. Go to your little YouTube button, search button, and type Sunday School with the Deek, Issues of Love, and you can watch the entire lesson from last week. This week our lesson picks up in chapter 41, verse 25. A lot happens between where we left off in chapter 37, verse 28, and where we pick up in chapter 41, verse 25. And I would strongly consider that you stop right now, at least read all of chapter 39, all of chapter 40, and up through verse 24 of chapter 41. Because in chapter 38 is dedicated to Judah, who is one of Joseph's brothers. But if you want to get caught up, read those chapters. But I'm going to give you a 60-second recap of chapter 40, chapter 41, chapter 39, chapter 40, chapter 41, all the way up to verse 24 to get us to the lesson. It might be more than 60 seconds, but here we go. So the Midianite traders took Joseph and sold him to the top associate of Pharaoh. Now, this top associate of Pharaoh's name was Potiphar, and he was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh. Now, I have to stop right here and tell you that this is not the same Pharaoh from Moses' time. Pharaoh is a title, like king. The difference between a king and a pharaoh was that a pharaoh was both considered the head of state and also the religious leader for that country at the same time. So there was several different pharaohs over time. So let's get back to the recap. The Bible tells us that the Lord was with Joseph in all that he did. Everything Potiphar had increased while Joseph was his servant. So much that he made Joseph the overseer of all his affairs. Now, from his finances to his servants to his home, everything in his house Joseph was put in charge of for Pharaoh. Now, everything was prospering for Potiphar, excuse me. Everything was prospering for Potiphar and Joseph until, dun, 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 Potiphar's wife decided she wanted Joseph. Joseph was a man of integrity, and he would not even consider sleeping with her, even though he had every opportunity to do it. So Joseph continued to turn Potiphar's wife down for sex to the point where she got mad. One day when nobody else was in the house, she tried to get Joseph to sleep with her, and he refused again. She came on to him, and he tried to get away. And when he tried to flee, she grabbed his garment, and he took off. So she was so enraged that she started screaming. She told everyone who would listen that Joseph tried to rape her, and that she had his torn garment to prove it. Once Potiphar found out what happened to his wife, he was full of rage and had Joseph thrown in jail. Now, once Joseph was in jail, he found favor with the Lord again. The prison guards loved him so much that they made him overseer of all the inmates. At one point, Pharaoh's butler and Pharaoh's baker had offended Pharaoh, and they were thrown in jail with Joseph. One night, the butler and the baker both had crazy dreams, and the dreams troubled them. They woke up the next morning, and Joseph could tell something was wrong with them. And he inquired with them, what was wrong? And they both told Joseph their dreams. And then so Joseph, giving all credit to God, interpreted their dreams. So without going into what the dreams were, because I don't have but 60 seconds, Joseph interpreted the butler's dream to mean he was going to get out of jail in 3 days and be put back into his old position as the butler for Pharaoh. Joseph told the butler, look, when this dream comes true, remember me. Remember your boy down here in jail. Put in a good word for me with Pharaoh so I can get out of here. But of course, like many of us do, we get out of trouble and we forget the promises that we made to other people. So Joseph interpreted the baker's dream also. And he told the baker's dream meant that he was going to get killed by Pharaoh in 3 days. Both of those dreams came true. The butler got his old job back, but he didn't remember the promise that he had made to Joseph. And then the baker was hanged by Pharaoh. So two whole years later, look what happens. Pharaoh has a dream. And that really bothered him. And that was in chapter 41, verse 1. Then a few days later, he had another dream. Chapter 41, verse 5. The dream troubled him as well. And he called all his magicians and all his wise men that worked for him to try to interpret both of these dreams, and none of them could interpret it. So then all of a sudden, the butler remembers, hey man, I remember a couple years ago when you threw me in jail, there was a guy in prison that helped interpret my dream. Maybe he's still there. And so the Bible says that the butler felt bad about not honoring his promise to him a while ago. So he tells Pharaoh all about it, and Pharaoh sends for him. Joseph is now brought to Pharaoh from jail to hear the dream in hopes that he can tell Pharaoh what it really meant. So starting with verse 17, Pharaoh tells Joseph his two dreams. And I'll read them from the New Living Translation, and then we can finally get into our lesson. How does that sound? All right, chapter 41, verse 17. So Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. In my dream, he said, I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the grass. But then I saw 7 sick looking cows, scrawny and thin, come up after them. And I've never seen such sorry looking animals in all of the land of Egypt. Then these thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows. But afterwards, you wouldn't have known it, for they were still thin and scrawny as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted and shriveled and withered by the east wind. And the shriveled heads swallowed the 7 healthy heads. I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they meant. So this is where our lesson picks up. Sorry for that lengthy introduction, but I can't just start at verse 25 and not give you the background. So let's get into the lesson. I'm going to try to make this real quick. Verse 25. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. God has showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. And so Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. Now, Joseph is about to interpret the dream, y'all. He says, even though there were 2 distinct dreams, the meaning is the same. And the fact that you had the dream twice shows how important it is, and that it was of God and that it was surely going to happen. So we also kind of see that in Joseph's dream that we studied last week in chapter 37, verse 6 through 9. He had 2 dreams that meant the same thing. So in the Bible, the number 2 is a number of witness. So God has shown Pharaoh what he's about to do. Even though the dreams made no sense to Pharaoh, God has shown Joseph what these dreams meant. And both dreams revealed the events that were going to take place at a future time. Verse 26. The 7 good kind are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. So I'm sorry, but when I read the dreams to you earlier, I read it out of the New Living Translation. But here I use the King James Version, so I need to let you know the word kind, K-I-N-E, means cows. Joseph is interpreting the dream now. He says that the 7 good cows in the first dream represent 7 years. And the 7 good ears of corn in the second dream represent 7 years. These 7 years are going to be 7 years of plenty. And so Joseph reiterates that the 2 dreams are one. And so even though he dreamed of nice fat plump cows in one dream and nice big fat succulent ears of corn in another dream, the dream is one. Let's go to 27. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. So now he interprets the second part of both dreams. He says the 7 thin and ill-favored cows, and ill-favored basically means scrawny. The 7 ill-favored scrawny cows that came up after the 7 fat, plump, juicy cows represent 7 years as well. And then 7 thin ears of corn that were withered by the east wind that came up after the nice, fat, juicy, succulent ears of corn are also 7 years. Both of these dreams are one. But they both meant that there's going to be 7 years of famine in the land. And I'll throw this in for free. The east wind is mentioned 17 times in the Bible. And it's always associated with some sort of destruction. If you remember the story of Jonah, his beloved gourd that he loved so much was destroyed by an east wind. Anyway, the next few verses is going to help explain a little bit more. Let's go to verse 28. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. So Joseph is just letting Pharaoh know that the things that he interpreted is going to happen. And God has given Pharaoh an advance notice of what is about to happen. He gave him notice with these 2 weird dreams. Verse 29. Behold, there comes 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. So here's the breakdown of the dream, y'all. It was hard for me not to tell y'all what the dream meant before trying to wait on this verse. But now we're here, I can tell you. So the 7 flat, fat, plump, juicy cows and the 7 juicy, succulent ears of corn represent 7 years that Egypt will have a very prosperous harvest. I mean, they're going to have crops like you've never seen before, they're going to be amazed at the type of crops that are going to come up and fill their land. Let's go to verse 30. And there shall rise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. Now, here is part 2 of the dream. The 7 skinny cows, or the 7 scrawny cows, or 7 ill-favored cows, however you want to put it, and then the 7 skinny ears of corn blasted by the east wind, both represent 7 years of famine that will come after the 7 years of plenty. So there's going to be 7 years where they're just going to have so many crops they can't even hold it. And then there's going to be 7 years of famine. And we know, and if you don't know, a famine is where there's no rain, the land is dry, and there's no crops grow. And Egypt, it doesn't rain a lot anyway. They're irrigated from the Nile River, but it was going to be so bad that Egypt is not even going to be able to get irrigated. So the next part of the verse is what gets me. It says that all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. Now, have you ever enjoyed something so much that when it's gone, you forgot that you ever had it? I mean, I don't care if it's money, I don't care if it's food or whatever. When you get the exact opposite of what you had, it's like you never had the plenty before. I could go on a 2-week vacation to Jamaica, and the minute I walk back into work, it's like I ain't never went nowhere. Have you ever had that feeling? I know I have. How about this one? Have you ever been so good to somebody all the time been so good to somebody, and the minute you mess up and do one bad thing, all they could think about for the rest of their life is that bad thing that they did? That's what's going on here. Joseph says that the famine is going to be so bad, you're going to forget how good you had it. And he says the famine shall consume the land, meaning the land will dry up, but it shall consume the minds of the people also. And that's how bad it's going to be. And we can almost relate right now to what we're going through with this pandemic. A lot of us are holding on to memories of what it used to be just 8 months ago. That it's almost getting to the point where you can't even remember going somewhere without a mask. Anyway, verse 31. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. Remember that the dream that I read to you before we got into the lesson? It said that when the skinny cows ate the fat, plump, juicy cows, that they were still skinny and scrawny. And so, I mean, they ate it and they were still skinny. So that's what's going to happen here. Not just in Egypt where Pharaoh was, but the whole entire earth. And so things will be so bad in the minds of the people that they won't even be able to remember the good old days. It'll be like they never enjoyed it. So Joseph says it's going to be grievous. And grievous is a word that we don't really use a lot in our vocabulary. I mean, we use a derivative of grievous, which is grief. But grievous means very severe. So basically, it's going to be a time like the earth has never seen before. Verse 32. And for that, the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. And so Joseph said, this is why you had 2 dreams with the same meaning, because God has ordained it and God is going to make it happen. And this is why I ended my lesson off last week by saying that we could try to manipulate situations all we want, but God has the last say. Joseph's brothers wanted to kill him, but God had gotten the heart of Reuben, and they sold him to the Midianites instead, who in turn sold him to the Egyptians. So thinking that they would make that dream not come true. But God has the last say, I'm telling you. You can try all you want to make things happen in your life, but in the end, it's God's will that's going to be done. God spoke all of this through Joseph, using Joseph as a guide to Pharaoh. And some of us wish God would give us this kind of supernatural guidance. I know I would. Many of us want guidance from God, like Google Maps or something, showing us, where to go and what to do, and how many miles to the next obstacle in your life, or where's the speed trap, where the cops are, so we can know when we can break the law and when we can't. Anyway, but unfortunately, many of us are not going to be offered this kind of power that Joseph has. So. But I do have a remedy for you guys. You can use Jesus as a guide. Stay close to him, and he'll guide you along the way. Instead of looking for a map, look for a guide. And the guide is Jesus Christ. Let's go to verse 33. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look out at a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Now, Pharaoh didn't ask for this advice. He only asked Joseph to interpret the dream. Yet, here we find Joseph offering up some divine advice to Pharaoh. See, to this point, Joseph gave Pharaoh knowledge of what was going to happen, which he revealed in his dreams, which were a message from God. Now Joseph began to apply wisdom to that knowledge. See, it's good to remember the difference between knowledge and wisdom. We did a whole 13-week quarter on wisdom. Now, knowledge tells you what's going on. Wisdom tells you what to do about it. Knowledge is the diagnosis. Wisdom is the cure. So, knowledge is necessary for all of us, but it's not enough. You need wisdom. This world needs wisdom. Pharaoh was a true leader of his country because just like every king should be, he was concerned for the good of his country. And he wanted to protect them from the worst things to come. That's a leader, y'all. And so Joseph tells Pharaoh, what you need to do is look for someone who is wise to oversee the next 14 years. You need someone who understands what's going on and to put a plan in place so we can get through these years. So God had only revealed this to Pharaoh. All the people in the world, he revealed this to Pharaoh. So his country is going to be at an advantage, y'all, of knowing what's going to happen over the next 14 years. If you knew what was going to happen over the next 14 years and nobody else in the world knew, wouldn't you be trying to make the best out of that situation? So he said you need somebody not to take Pharaoh's place, but someone who could trust and care for the best interests of the nation as it relates to the land when it's going through plenty and then when it's going through famine. Kind of like, to lead a task force. So our lesson skips verse 34, 35, 36. But I'll read them from the New Living Translation. And then we'll pick back up at verse 37. We're doing good on time, y'all. So verse 34. Then Pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it to Pharaoh's storehouses. Store it away and guard it so there will be no food in the cities. Verse 36. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come to the land of Egypt. Otherwise, the famine will destroy the land. So the plan is that, hey, during those 7 good years, gather up as much as you can. And then when the 7 bad years come, you'll have enough food to get you through the 7 years. So our lesson picks back up in verse 37. Verse 37, and the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants. So as you can see from verse 37, you can see from the 3 verses that I read that weren't in our lesson, God has given wisdom to Joseph, and he saw what we should do in this coming crisis. The problem had to be understood. The goal and the vision to meet the goal had to be formulated, and the right people had to be put in place to get this thing accomplished. They had to understand the big vision, and they had to understand their role in this, and someone had to make sure that it was all operating to plan. So God will use a man to put all of this in place. It wouldn't happen by what we normally think, like a miracle or something like that. And so he says, give 1/5, meaning 20% tax is what's going to happen. And, most ancient sources say that the Pharaoh was already taking 10% of everybody's stuff for taxes, just like we pay taxes. He was already taking 10%. So basically, in essence, this was going to be he was going to double their taxes during this time. He's going to take 20% of their crops over the next 7 years. And that the land may not perish during the famine. So that way they can have stuff during the time when the famine was there. And so here it says that the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, meaning he liked the idea. And get this, and all his servants liked it too. So he's talking about all those magicians and everybody that were standing around and couldn't interpret the dream. They all liked it too. And God had to be with Joseph, because usually this would be a cause for much hate to be thrown around and a lot of shade to be thrown around, but they didn't happen. And I was going to mention this at the end, but look how Joseph has transformed from his years as a teenager. When he was 17, he was the one having the dreams and sharing his dreams unsolicited with anybody, with his brothers and his father. He was sharing all his dreams even when they didn't ask for it. And now, after being left for dead, after being sold twice, after being lied on by Potiphar's wife by saying he raped her, by spending years in jail, now instead of Joseph telling his dreams and being hated for what his dreams were, Joseph is saying, tell me your dreams. And he was being loved for it. Man, many times we look at dreams in a way that lift us up and accomplish our goals. But what if God gave you a dream to accomplish his goals? What if God means for your dreams to serve other people and not yourself? Put a pin in that one for now. We'll revisit that one in a few weeks, in the weeks to come. Let's go to verse 38. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? So Pharaoh turned to his servants, who just finished co-signing for the plan that Joseph came out with. He said, can we find somebody like this? If we search all the ranks of people in the country, can we find somebody like this? Can we find somebody who appears to have the Spirit of God? And so Pharaoh had plenty of priests, plenty of magicians, plenty of holy men, but what he did not have until Joseph got there was a man with the Spirit of God. And so this is the first mention in the Bible of the Holy Spirit coming upon a man. And so just think, we're only in the book of Genesis, the 41st chapter. You think of how many more times once the Holy Spirit comes to earth in the New Testament? See, he was being talked about back in Genesis. He also was there when God said, let us make man. Anyway, it's also interesting to note that that he saw this in practical things in Joseph. See, Joseph didn't have to preach a sermon or lead a prayer for Pharaoh to realize that the Spirit of God was on him. He could see it in his character. He could see it in Joseph's character. He could see it in Joseph's message. He could see it in his knowledge. He could see it in his wisdom. He could see it in his humility. That the presence of and the power of the Holy Spirit can be seen in practical things like character or humility. We don't have to wear a 10-pound cross around our necks or carry a Bible in each hand or put 1,000 bumper stickers on our car to let people know that we're of God. Just live a godly life. Be good to people. Be patient with people. Lower yourself. Lift other people up. Anyway, let's go to verse 39. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. So Pharaoh says to Joseph, since God has shown you all this stuff and he has given you the plan of what to do over the next 14 years, clearly there is no one else wise and as discreet as you to perform this job. And so this is the first real indication that Pharaoh wanted Joseph to be the one to save Egypt through this planning and this preparation. And it's probably surprised Joseph. I mean, Joseph is the type of person that's not looking for anything. And so, but if you think about it, God was always preparing Joseph for this. See, because he's about to be put in charge. And so when you're in charge, people favor you. Who favored him? His dad back in the day. So when you're in charge, people get jealous of you. Who got jealous of him back in the day? His brothers. When you're in charge, people try to take you down. Who tried to take him down? His brothers back in the day. So Joseph was also in charge of the prisoners. Joseph was also in charge of Potiphar's affairs. And so God was just preparing Joseph for this moment. And so whether you know it or not, God could be preparing you for something in the future right now. You know, you may be currently in a situation and all you're doing is looking at it for that situation. But God could be preparing you for a job he has for you 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Do you think Joseph thought that he'd be second in command in Egypt when Potiphar's wife said that he raped her? That's the last thing on his mind. Just continue to operate with integrity in all you do. That's why the lesson is called God Rewards Obedience. Act with wisdom. Act with the wisdom of God in all you do, and God will take care of the rest. Let's go to verse 40. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. Oh my God. Oh my God. Won't he do it? I'm telling you. Pharaoh tells Joseph, you will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a higher rank than you. Man, tell me God can't do anything. This man that was in a pit a few years ago. This man was lied on and thrown in jail a few years ago. Now he's being put second in command in all of Egypt. And he's not even an Egyptian. Man, so don't get down in the dumps when you go through difficult times in your life. Stay with God. If Jacob hadn't favored Joseph over all his brothers and gave him that coat of many colors, his brothers wouldn't have got jealous. If his brothers hadn't got jealous, they wouldn't have plotted to kill him and throw him in the pit. If he hadn't gotten thrown in the pit, he wouldn't have got sold to the Midianites. If he hadn't gotten sold to the Midianites, he wouldn't have got sold to Potiphar. If he hadn't gotten sold to Potiphar, he wouldn't have been put in charge of all of Potiphar's affairs. If he hadn't gotten put in charge of all of Potiphar's affairs, his wife wouldn't have tried to have sex with him. If she hadn't tried to sleep with him, then she wouldn't have claimed that he raped her. If she hadn't claimed that he raped her, then he wouldn't got thrown in jail. If he hadn't got thrown in jail, then he wouldn't have met the butler and the baker. If he hadn't met the butler and the baker, he wouldn't have been able to interpret their dreams. If he hadn't interpreted their dreams, then he wouldn't have been called to interpret Pharaoh's dreams. And if he hadn't interpreted Pharaoh's dreams, then he wouldn't have been placed number 2 in all of Egypt. Man, tell me God ain't good. See, God is taking him from the pit to the palace. Man, I'm getting chills just thinking about that. So don't get discouraged when you feel like you're in a terrible position or a terrible situation for reasons you had nothing to do with. Joseph did like James told us to do in our lesson called Faith and Wisdom back on August 16th. That was 6 weeks ago. Remember, James said, count it all joy when you go through diverse temptations. Man, see, if you missed it, go back to the Deek's lesson on August 16th and watch it. See, you never know what God is doing. The key for us is to be obedient and stop acting, and start acting with integrity and keep the faith. The Bible this Bible will make you want to shout, I'm telling you. Now our lesson skips verses 41 through 49, but I'll read it from the New Living Translation. Verse 41. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen and hung a gold chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down. So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all of Egypt. Now, you know who part of the people was that had to kneel down whenever they saw Joseph? Potiphar and his wife. Woo! You don't have to take revenge on people. Just give it to God. Verse 44. And Pharaoh said to him, I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or a foot in this entire land of Egypt without your approval, Joseph. Then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphnath-Paneah. He also gave him a wife whose name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. Verse 46. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. Now, who else was 30 years old when he started his ministry? Bible, man, I'm telling you. Verse 47. As predicted, for 7 years, the land produced bumper crops. Verse 48. During those years, Joseph gathered all the crops grown in Egypt and stored the grain from the surrounding fields in the cities. He piled up huge amounts of grain like sand on the seashore. Finally, he stopped keeping records because there was so much food that he couldn't even keep record of it. Wow. Now, the lesson picks back up in verse 50 through 52. And verse 50. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of the famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. So unto Joseph was born 2 sons before the famine came. So that basically means that during the 7 years of plenty, Joseph got his wife pregnant, or before the 7 years of plenty. Did I say before? I can't even remember. Before the years of plenty came, he got his wife pregnant. And the word used for born here is a singular in the Greek, so it's thought that they were twins. His wife's name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potiphar, who was the priest of On. So, man, he married into royalty, y'all. God is so good. Now, I want to spend a few moments on the next 2 verses because I think it's something in there for all of us, y'all. So listen closely. Verse 51. And Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, for God said, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. Verse 52. And the name of the second son he called Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. So you're probably like, Deek, why do you want to spend some time on 2 verses that talks about what Joseph named his kids? Well, I know names don't mean a whole lot nowadays, but back then they had a whole lot of meaning. We get twins now that might be named Benson and Hedges or Bartles and James. Now with what we're going through, you might get kids named Corona and Quarantine. Don't they look cute? Anyway, Seriously, I want you to notice something about the type of person Joseph was. Look at what he names his first son, Manasseh. The meaning attached to this name is God has made me forget. What Joseph is referring to is the toil and the turmoil that he had to deal with his brothers when he was at home in his father's house. It has been 17 years since he was thrown in that pit. It's been 13 years since he was thrown in that pit. And Joseph understands that he has gone through all of this experience to get where he is now. But the part I want you to hone in on is he said God has made him forget. Joseph's brothers had done some mighty, mighty terrible things to him. They threw him in a pit. They took his coat. They killed an animal and rolled his coat in the blood so that his father would think that he was killed by an animal. They felt sorry for him and sold him for 20 pieces of silver, all because they were jealous of him. And here in verse 51, he names his child Manasseh because God has made him forget. How many of us could forget somebody trying to kill us, especially our brothers? And I know there's a lot of stuff that has happened to you that's much less than somebody trying to kill you that you still don't want to forget. So some of us might say, I forgive, but I won't forget. Or some of us might even say, if that person, I'm not going to forgive unless that person don't ask for forgiveness. But if you remember, Jesus told God to forgive those that crucified him. He said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And you think they was thinking about asking for forgiveness? Man. Do you think Joseph's brothers was seeking forgiveness? Please. But see, Joseph moved on. And he realized that his past has shaped his presence. And he's moved on from it. Joseph gives us the key right here, y'all. Listen, in what he names his son. He said, God has made me forget. Meaning he asked God to help him move on and forget about his past. And to be honest, the Spirit of God is to totally forget what has happened to you, because that's what God does for us every time we sin and we ask for forgiveness. God will make you forget it if you want to forget it. The key is you wanting to forget it. And if you don't want to forget it, if you don't want God to help you forget, then I don't think you want to forget. And you want to remain in the place where you are. So don't allow hate. Don't allow resentment. Don't allow dislike take up residence in your mind or in your heart. The space that you got here and here is too valuable to hold on, to give it to hate and resentment. That's high rent district, y'all. This is high rent district. So you want to put positive things in these places. I'm teaching to myself too. That's why I wanted to get this to y'all. The last verse says that he names his other son Ephraim because God has made him fruitful in the land of his grief. So Egypt has not been good to Joseph. He's been blamed for rape. He's been put in jail. But God be the glory. He has now become fruitful in the same place that has given him grief. Every knee shall bow when he comes around. He is a Hebrew, second in command in Egypt. And how could Pharaoh set a Hebrew prisoner over all the land of Egypt on the basis of a dream that ain't even happened yet? You know why? Proverbs 21:1 says, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord. As the rivers of the water, he turneth it whatsoever he will. Man, that's a good. God has made him fruitful in the land of the grief. God has made that king's heart be the way it is. So, because God can do anything. That was a good lesson, y'all. I'm tired. So I'm telling you, this Bible will either draw you or drive you, right? So let's do a real quick recap. Joseph has continued to show his obedience throughout all of his trials and tribulations. Joseph stayed willing to help throughout those difficulties, and he honored God in those times by doing the best job he could over Potiphar's affairs, over the prisoners in the jail. He did the best job he could. And because of his obedience, God rewarded him. There was a 13-year span that Joseph could have questioned God, but he didn't. Joseph is the epitome of the term, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Just add a little sugar to it. Make some lemonade, y'all. And lastly, if you want to forget, God will make you forget. And just like Joseph's kids, look at this. With forgetfulness comes fruitfulness. Ooh! His kids were named after forgetfulness and fruitfulness. If you forget, you'll be fruitful. Man, oh man, this was good stuff today. I can't wait till next week. See, we're going to be dealing with Joseph again next week, and you don't want to miss that one because Joseph gets reunited with his brothers next week. Woo! We'll be in chapter 42, verses 6 through 25, and that lesson is called Love versus Guilt. Hold on to your seats, class. I can't wait. I actually want to start studying right now. Woo! Okay, here is another lesson. And as we say every week, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we're absent one from another.